Good evening, and thank you for joining us on February the 19th for our 5 at 5 for Caregivers. I'm Karen Keating with the Brain Injury Association of North Carolina, and I'm also the parent of a young man who sustained a brain injury in 2002 at the age of 16. And as we go on this journey of caregiving, there's no handbook, there's no directions. You don't even know what you don't know. And as we head into March, which is Brain Injury Awareness Month, I've asked my co-worker, Susan Fuel, to join us today. She helps to run a group for caregivers, and I've asked her to invite someone here to tell their story about caregiving. Susan, thank you for coming on today. And who have you invited to join us?
All right, I have Charlie Fisk here from Massachusetts today. I first heard from Mr. Fisk in May of 2020, and his daughter, Jamie, who was living in North Carolina at the time, had sustained a severe brain injury. You know, brain injuries are classified as mild, moderate, and severe, and Jamie's was a severe brain injury. And he was seeking resources and information. So, Mr. Fisk, what were the circumstances of your daughter's brain injury?
Thank you, first of all, for inviting me. And it's cold in Massachusetts right now. I can't tell you, and it's going to big snowstorm tonight. But anyways, Jamie turned 38, and about 5 days later, she had this severe pain behind her right eye, and come to find out she had a couple of aneurysms in her brain that just caused a lot of damage. And that was back in December of 2019. And then she went to Duke University Hospital for surgery to put in a couple of clamps to stop the bleeding, and then went to an LTAC up in Greensboro for another month, and then finally ended up at Pruitt Health down in Raleigh. And part of the thing is, you get thrown into this and you know nothing, you don't know anybody. And Jamie had a liver transplant when she was 11 months old. So I was pretty familiar with systems and how things work. But part of it was I knew nothing about brain injury. So I started asking around, and I ended up reaching out here in Massachusetts to the Brain Injury Association, who have been very supportive. And by the way, they said, we're connected across the country. And so one thing led to the other, and it ended up on Susan's doorstep. And she was so helpful in terms of pointing out what would be available for Jamie in North Carolina, and also taking a look at what was offered in Massachusetts, because there was a class action suit in 2011 with a woman named Kathy Hutchinson, who was parked in a nursing home with a brain injury. And the suit basically said anybody beyond the age of 22, that has an acquired brain injury should be getting services as if they had a developmental disabilities from birth, set aside a ton of funding to provide for those patients, and also contracted with UMass Medical School to set up a UMass Medical School ABI waiver program to oversee the whole thing, to, I think, give people a sense of hope that there's a possibility. Things may never be what they were, but it's also a sense of where do we go from here, and maximizing, from a rehab point of view, the potential that we all have to rise to our full capacity. And I think part of it is realizing that Jamie is not going to be the Jamie that I remember, but you know what? She's still my daughter. I still love her. I would do anything for her. And you say, how do I bring this thing forward to get her the best possible care? So it meant having to seek guardianship, which because I needed to make decisions for that, and it ended up back in court. And sometimes as people in the family say, well, we want to do it this way and that way. But I know basically through what Susan had spelled out to me, in terms of what could be available for Jamie if she stayed there because of the lack of coverage. In addition to that, fortunately, Susan's family member, brother-in-law, works for the Department of Developmental Services here, Steve Rogers. So I reached out to him, and he kind of walked me through what's available for brain injured patients that are getting services through the Department of Developmental Services here. I think part of it
was a fluke, wasn't it, Charlie? Because who knew that my brother-in-law lived in the exact community that you did?
Exactly.
And you did have to, because Jamie was over 18, you were no longer her legal guardian, so you
That's
had
right.
to go through a court process
Right.
to get that guardianship.
And it also sounds, fortunately or unfortunately, you had to deal with the medical community early on for Jamie with,
Right.
other health issues. And so you had a little bit of knowledge about kind of where to go.
Right.
Same with me. I was working at the time in a cardiology office as a triage coordinator. So I did know the medical community, but nothing about the brain injury piece.
But imagine family members who do not have the background that the two of them have, and needing that advocate. All right, as time has gone on, because it's been almost coming up, well, it's been a year since your daughter's brain injury. What do you wish you had known back then, Charlie?
That's a good question. I first wanted to know from the medical community what we're really looking at. She's pretty banged up, and so part of it is getting a sense from them without saying, "Oh, take a couple of aspirins, she's going to be better, and she's going to get up and walk home." I think getting it from those particular people is extremely helpful. That you have information that may be very painful to hear, it may be very discouraging. And then you throw on top of all of that whole mess, the COVID situation just makes it more complicated. And you feel like, I think what happens is you feel like you're trapped. But then I remembered all the stuff we'd gone through when Jamie was a baby, and she was the youngest person that had gotten a liver transplant ever in 1982, and the steps we had to take. It was kind of a rehearsal for what is happening now. And I did not know much about brain injury at all. And I do know the Department of Developmental Services covers traumatic and acquired brain injury, but my specialty was much more in developmental disabilities and intellectual disabilities. So I think you are faced with realizing how much you really don't know and how really isolated you are until you start realizing that if you ask around, other people have gone through similar kind of things. And then again, through the Brain Injury Association here in Massachusetts, I ended up on Susan's doorstep, which all of a sudden opened up a whole wealth of information that was so critical in moving Jamie forward and getting her back to Boston. And that kind of support is so critical, even though you feel isolated. I guess I've been really fortunate. I kind of always have looked at the glass as half full. And I realized pretty quickly on that she was not going to be the same. And I think that made it difficult for some family members to say, "Oh, she's going to get better and she's going to do this and she's going to do that." And probably not. But I think part of it is, okay, what do I do as a parent, as you would do with her when she was a baby? You advocate for her and you realize that, if you don't do it, it's not going to get done.
And Charlie, that makes so much sense. And so with that being said, if you were talking to families that are new on this journey now, that have a loved one that's just sustained an injury, what would be some of the, 1-2 pieces of advice that you could give them? What would they need to do first? Where could they turn right away to kind of start them on the path that they need to be?
I think one of the things that probably it goes without saying is to, on the front end of it, get some correct information from the medical community so that you're not getting a sense of false expectations. Even though that's hard to ask that, I think it's important to ask those kind of questions. How severely injured is my son or my daughter or my brother or my sister or my family member? So that at least you're not going off trying on a crusade where you know that this person is going to do something and ultimately they're not. I think that's probably the first place to begin. The second place is a lot of facilities have either good case managers or good social workers who can plug into the community. There was a case manager up at Kindred Hospital in Greensboro. She was a wealth of information about resources out there. And the same with the social worker at Duke University Hospital. I think it gets down to asking people and letting people how much you don't know. And it's sort of like how much I will ask everybody. You kind of pick their brain, what kind of experiences they had, and then you begin to find out there's a network of people out there that are willing to say, okay, we'll listen to you, we'll help you. it won't make things better necessarily, but will give you the kind of support and encouragement to keep going forward. Because we both know how overwhelming it is. It's just
Absolutely. And it also sounds to me that, you know, this also goes back to the medical community of being able to get that hard to hear sometimes information, but that you are told the situation so that you do have the expectations going forward.
Right.
You know, I know with me, you know, I didn't want to sugarcoat it. Don't tell me something that's not going to be. So
Right.
I think from the get-go, and even from the Brain Injury Association standpoint and other folks that do education, that could be something that we could also share as part of training or education for the medical community. You know, it may be hard to tell these families certain situations, but that's really what the family needs and wants to hear, even though they may not recognize that. Would you say that's true?
I think that's so critical. You don't want people like me a year later saying, well, you never told me that. I didn't realize that. I was getting, fortunately, from the surgeon who did the surgery on Jamie's brain to put in a couple of clamps on the aneurysm. He was very straightforward. I can't look back and say he hid anything from me. I asked the questions and he was very clear about answering that. I wanted him to say, no, it's okay. She's going to get better and she'll walk out of the hospital and go home. But he didn't tell me that. And he told me what I was facing and what she was facing. It makes it easier to put that in perspective when you're marching forward a year later or 6 months later to say, okay, here's where we're going. And I come out of a rehab model, which basically says, you know, you never get the car to run to 100%. You get it fixed and you drive it 200 miles and it breaks down. Push it back in the garage and work on it. And that's what you're dealing with, in my case, with Jamie. It's sort of like, she's not going to run at 100%, but we're going to try and get some movement forward as much as she's capable of doing that, however little that might be.
Right. So you just moved your daughter from North Carolina after a
Yes.
year to Massachusetts. And so what are you struggling with now to get her situated there?
She ended up in a hospital. To get into the acquired brain injury program run through UMass, they require that you be in a skilled nursing facility for 3 months. And in Jamie's case, because she'd been in a skilled nursing facility for almost a year, they've said, look, we can kind of adjust that a little bit. So part of that is getting her settled here. She's at a place called Shattuck Hospital in Boston. She'll be there for a short while. And then we'll begin looking at possibly, with the ABI program, they've divided it into 3 categories: in-home, a day program, and a residential program. Jamie would be on the residential side. So that will be probably the next step in maybe the next 2 months. And also, in this particular case, because of the Affordable Care Act in Massachusetts, it's called Mass Health. It is, if you get sick, probably come to Massachusetts. It's a good place to at least know that coverage is clearly there. I'll get that in place. And just, again, I'm on the learning curve. It's on the front end of this right now. And some of the folks at Department of Developmental Services are able to hold my hand and walk me through this kind of, like, for example, Susan, your brother-in-law. I talked to him the other day. He said to say hello to you, by the way. He says, he had said, okay, Charlie, we'll start talking the next step. And he's already introduced me to people within the Department of Developmental Services who oversee ABI waiver programs. So it's a case of networking and telling people what you don't know and continually picking people's brain. That's all.
All right, Charlie, my last question and most important, this has been a very stressful year. What are you doing to take care of Charlie?
One of the things that I've done since a million years ago, I'm a runner by trade. I run every morning about 5K. It's kind of, to me, it's kind of rejuvenating everything. I've got a great network of friends, a great network of family. I have 3 sisters. 2 of them, we probably talk each other every day, just kind of gossipy stuff. They're very supportive. And I've got friends who are loyal, lifelong friends who keep their eye out for me. And will, you know, coming back from the hospital, I get 4 phone calls from a couple of people saying, well, I know she went to Boston. Is she there? Just basically protecting me. And I think taking advantage of those friendships. And in many cases, I've done the same for those family members or friends. You You become part of their lives and they become part of yours. So you don't really feel isolated and alone, even in the difficult times.